So this is the first in a series of talks on stages of reading. And today we're going to talk about the queuing systems that exist. And these are central to your teaching, mainly because they're central to how you assess reading. You're going to look at students as they read, and you're going to analyze the kind of errors they make. And these are often errors based on the queuing systems that they're using. The queuing systems also provide us an understanding of how language and meaning making work. Who can remember any of the systems? Three queuing systems from the reading. Phonological systems, syntactic systems, semantic systems, and what was the last one? Pragmatic systems. Yeah, so I said 3, I mean 4, because we often don't deal with the pragmatics as much as we should, but it is important. So these queuing systems, in essence, when we look at comprehension and meaning, you need all 3 to make meaning. Semantic, that's semantic, and this is graphonic cues, and this middle one is what's the last one missing, guys? Semantic, syntactic. Sorry, I didn't show that up. Your syntactic cues. So your queuing systems are critical to understanding. Basically, a text is a tool, and it has cues built into it that help us understand what those symbols are supposed to mean. Phonological systems. Anybody want to take a gander? What is a phonological system? The phonological system?
It's the sounds.
Yeah, it's sounds. Think about a phonogram. We're definitely talking sounds. And we're going to be talking a lot more in depth about phonological systems throughout the semester. The first is part, and these are all key definitions that you really, truly need to understand. The first part is a phoneme. And what is a phoneme? Smallest unit of sound. Good job. How many of them are there? 44. Yes. So being able to recognize and hear that there's 44 phonemes. And you start off by just being able to recognize sounds. And a grapheme. A written representation of the sound, yes. These are all kinds of phonological cues in the phonological systems. And as a teacher, that's where you're kind of taking that next step, is you have to start connecting the graphical representation of a sound to the sound. Anybody know what that's called? When I'm connecting the letter, the symbolic representation of a sound to an actual letter? Yeah. But first is this idea of phonological awareness. In every one of these topics, today's we're still in that introductory period of stuff we're going to cover this semester. We'll be spending, an entire 2 weeks on phonological awareness, an entire 2 weeks on phonics. But these are just to introduce you to kind of the queuing systems involved in learning to read. If you put phonological awareness on a continuum, starting at less complex activities to more complex, first is being able to rhyme themselves. Bat, cat, fish. Which ones rhyme? The name game. Then being able to count out and stretch out words by sounds. Or using say it, move it, where if you hear then you have a bunch of tokens in front of you, and you move the tokens up based on how many sounds you hear. Then we talk about onsets and rhymes. Anybody know what an onset is from the reading?
Everything before the vowel.
Yeah, it's the beginning part of the word. It's an easy way to put it. You know, cat, at, and see. Being able to manipulate those onsets and break them up. Now we're getting into tougher skills. So if I gave you a picture of a cat and a hat and said, all right, what do you have to switch in this word to make a hat? You'd find the letter H and push it out and push it in. You confused?
What's an onset again?
A consonant?
No, an onset.
An onset's like the beginning part of the word. I'll give you the more technical definition when we're in a phonological awareness unit. Phonemic awareness is the ability to basically hear those sounds. It's like a subset of phonological awareness. And this is the ability to hear the difference in the sounds. Kite, cat, they start the same. Like a child can recognize those sounds. They can hear 4 sounds in sweet. So we'll eat. So you can take a slinky, for example. And I play this game with my 5-year-old all the time called Smash It. Where you stretch out a word, and then you smash a word. I don't know, something about 5-year-old boys, they like smashing things. So here we can take the slinky and be like, sa, la, eat, and then smash together and say sweet. And you'll see them that basically it's a great technique to build phonemic awareness in students, and and you're using cueing systems to teach them to read. Phonics. We're moving from sounds now into graphic representations of sounds, using those graphemes. So an activity I do with my students is make a little spinner game. And they can either spin an F or a V, and they spin it around and try to identify words, that could, like van and fan, but vibe is not a word. Revive, but words are complex things. But, so now we're actually putting letters to represent sounds. And we're manipulating things like their onsets and their rhymes. So that is the phonemic system. Oh, sorry, the phonological system. That was my mistake. And that's basically, can you take apart words and build them back together and have meaning? That's meaning at its most basic level, the word level. Now we're going to move on to kind of the sentence level, the paragraph level. And that is where syntactic systems come involved as part of our cueing systems. Anybody, this is the most complicated sentence diagram. Not the hugest fan of diagramming sentences. I don't really see the point, but it's a good graphic representation of what I mean by syntactic systems. And syntax, so anybody who gives the definition of syntax? Look back through your notes. Sam?
The structure of grammar of a sentence.
Yeah, we're literally talking about the structure and grammar of a sentence. So, things such as subject and verb. And we have specific syntax in our English language. Why is syntax an important thing for cueing meaning? How do syntax systems help us understand the text or help us learn to read? Yes, ma'am.
So you can understand what the sentence is saying, you know where the verb is, what the subject is, what the sentence is saying.
Yeah, like knowing where the subject verb go, that cues you in as a reader. That's why we're called cue systems, into what's coming next. It's part of the reasons why it's sometimes difficult to learn foreign languages, because they have different syntax. So, I mean, and you'll hear this often a lot in toddlers with the use of, like, say, pronouns. It's like me happy, me sad, or that me bus, you know, and they're not saying it's mine or I am happy. They're developing syntax of the English language. A morpheme. Look, remind us, what is a morpheme? Yes, ma'am?
The smallest meaningful unit of language.
Yes, it is the smallest meaningful unit of language. Now, other side note tip, folks. If you all took these notes during your note taking, you know, you could be judicious about your note taking now, because you might be writing the same thing twice, is my guess. So yes, morphemes are the smallest unit. How did you say it again?
Smallest meaningful unit of language.
The smallest meaningful unit of languages. And there are two kinds of morphemes: free morphemes and bound morphemes. Free morphemes can stand on their own. They can have meaning in themselves.
What would be an example of a free morpheme?
A word, say like nation, the, and. But a bound morpheme has to be attached to something. These are oftentimes your roots and your suffixes. They mean something, like re, or al, or is, or like the tion. Putting tion on a word changes it to a noun every time. So if I verbalize, that's a verb, correct? Verbalization is a noun. So your roots and your suffixes, in a sense. They have meaning attached to them, but they can't stand alone. And I don't know if free the bound morpheme is some kind of internet meme, but when I was stealing images from Google Images, that it kept popping up like it was some kind of meme. Oh, morpheme meme. The next system is your semantic systems. And semantic systems, who can define semantic systems for us? Michelle?
Meaning system focused on vocabulary.
Meaning system focused on vocabulary. Anything you want to add? Yeah, this is your vocabulary, your general knowledge. This idea that mammal, you have this kind of map. Well, a bear is a mammal, a whale is a mammal, a bear has fur, whales have hair, people have hair, cats have fur. So where they live, like you have this gigantic, and that's when you hear things talking about the semantic web or Web 3.0, the semantic web is coming. They just mean that you could the internet will be smart enough to know your connections and know semantically. If you were to search for something like who was George Washington, and then said was he the first president, they would understand semantically that he referred back to George Washington. That's all that the semantic web kind of means. But semantic systems are very important as a cue. One of the hardest things to overcome, and one of the most important predictors of reading ability, is your prior knowledge. The background knowledge that students bring to a text greatly predicts how well they are going to read and understand that said text. But authors also give in semantic cues, like you have pictures in the documents, or pictures in the text. Picture books are full of semantic cues. So as a teacher, you have to utilize semantic cues in order to increase understanding. You might do things like activating prior knowledge to increase to use semantic cues. But you want to do this in a way that doesn't take up all of your instructional time, or it doesn't favor those who have more things in their knowledge web than over students who do not. So how do you support meaning and vocabulary? Well, do things like having kids investigate antonyms. What's an antonym? Opposite. And a synonym? The same. So explore things about, like, with words. This is called a four-square model. And this is one way you can use a word in a sentence. You can draw a picture of it. You can be a synonym and an antonym. Find it in your own words. Define it, there. So you're having students create multiple representations of vocabulary words. In terms of vocabulary, and we're going to do a whole, section on vocabulary this semester. But in terms of vocabulary, we really refer to three types. And you've probably heard me say this often. Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 vocabulary. What's Tier 1 vocabulary?
Like the best, or like the most.
Scale those together. Yeah, the most. Okay, keep going with this idea of most.
I don't know. I'm just thinking
The more commonplace.
Yeah, the more common words. The words we use the most is Tier 1. Your everyday language. And that's usually language that children will just pick up automatically. Can, you, that. Tier 2 words, like example, they're more academically based words, but that cut across all disciplines. And so, you 318 students, you'll be doing a lot of work in Tier 1 and Tier 2 words. Especially a lot with Tier 1. The goal in early childhood education is to support reading through the use of oral language development. I mean, that is, if you have one mission in life, it's to expose your students to as much high-frequency use of Tier 2 and Tier 1 words, and to utilize effective text-based talk around stories that you're reading in your classroom with your students. That is the mission of the early childhood education. As you get older, you move into Tier 2 and Tier 3 words. So now we've talked about Tier 2 words. What do we think Tier 3 words might be? Go ahead with that.
subject specific.
Yes, subject-specific words that you wouldn't use anywhere else, like osmosis. When was the last time you used osmosis not in the context of a science class? Or rhombozoid. Have you ever used rhombozoid not in your math class? It's just those are very specific words. In upper elementary or early elementary, but more especially in secondary education, Tier 3 words come to dominate your instruction. And so what you folks as early childhood and elementary teachers is you want to figure out and you want to expose them to as much Tier 2 vocabulary as possible. But you also got to give them the content knowledge to fill up those semantic webs. So you have to figure out ways to support their growth and understanding in content, because content equals comprehension. The more it's like the NBC like after school specials goes, the more you know that's flying like stars, whatever the sound is. But it's truth. The more you know, the more you can read. The more you can read, the more you know. It's a cycle that repeats itself. If you have better background knowledge, you're better at reading comprehension. If you're better at reading comprehension, you build more background knowledge. Which is why early childhood is such a critical period in addressing reading deficiencies in the upper grade levels. Another thing you do is work like with homonyms and homophones. Anybody know the difference? Somebody trying to figure out the difference between homonyms and homophones for us. Yeah, in the back. Have we been there yet? No. What do you think?
Well, I know what homonyms mean.
Uh-huh.
It's words that sound alike but are spelled differently.
Words that are sound alike and spelled differently. What's a homophone?
Well, the same sense.
Spelled the same but mean different. All right, I want everybody to, if you have a cell phone or anything, Google that. Let's figure out. Let's see who's right. Because I think their textbook, they had a chart, and I think the chart in this definition is slightly confusing.
Homonym is a group of words that share the same spelling and the same pronunciation but have different meanings. Homophone is a word that is pronounced the same as another word but differs in meaning.
It has a different spelling.
The words may be spelled the same, such as a rose flower and a rose past tense of rose.
So think about how hard that is for kids to understand. I mean, this is just one example of a kind of semantic cue that kids can make. Now, the pragmatic system. This is kind of a newer idea of the queuing system. And this is this idea of grammar, per se, that there's these kind of social rules that dictate how texts are written, and that texts exist into a larger sociocultural picture. And that if you can identify things like text structure, and you understand the grammar of specific texts, you can use those cues to help you make meaning. So these cues, why are these important? Well, one, they're going to determine a lot of how you teach. They're going to help you determine what you teach. And they're basic vocabulary that every reading teacher needs to know. The words that we've kind of gone over today, I tried to hit the major vocabulary from the queuing systems. So before we move on to the activity based on the queuing systems, yes, ma'am.
Wait, so is it for the two of them, which one? That sound alike but spelled differently, or can you just repeat that, or?
You can give me the definitions of homonyms and homophones again?
A homonym is one of a group of words that share the same spelling and the same pronunciation, but have different meanings.
So can and can. I can go to the mall. I open up a can of whoop ass.
And a homophone is a word that is pronounced the same as another word, but differs in meaning.
Which, and which? Or which went to? So I think it was hard to understand from the text. That's why I kind of wanted to get that across. But that's just, there's usually just one homophone question. So I like you guys to know those kind of key terms. And when we get further into the semester, we'll really dive and start playing with these ideas. So that's really the big takeaway from that. The rest of Chapter 1 of Tompkins was really organized as an idea of effective practices. And it was like they threw the smorgasbord at you of what everything and every teacher needs to do. It's okay if you don't get overwhelmed by it. Here's the 17 principles of effective teaching. What you need to know is this idea that you have to use explicit instruction in those elements. And you have to give the kids the opportunities to use queuing systems in order to make meaning. And you do that by providing explicit instructions in the areas that we lined out the first day. In what are they? They're phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, word recognition, comprehension. Right? And so but you need to take those 5 things and embed them into your effective literacy practices, the other principles that they outline. but you still provide explicit instructions in those areas. And we're going to do a quick activity. Let me just